before I introduce myself or introduce the topic, I actually wanted to share a statistic with you. So did you know that on average, we pick up our phone 58 times a day? Now, what does that mean? It means that if we are in a live event, we get distracted really easily. But imagine you are in a remote event just like this, you get distracted even more easily, and even you're more inclined to pick up that phone. So really the topic of interaction during the meetings, whether be it a live meeting or a remote meeting, is crucial. So that's why today I'm here to talk to you about the tactics or techniques and strategies that you use to engage your audience at remote meetings. My name is Kristina Kumor, and I work at Slido, and I'm in charge of education and outreach. And just to give you a brief idea about what today's talk will look like, so I'm going to spend the next 30-35 minutes talking about some tips on how you can engage your remote audience. Now, these will include tips to do with Slido, but also tips that do not include Slido. So I really want to make it applicable to all of you. And then I would be very happy to address any questions that you have. Now, speaking of questions, I would love to invite you, if you have any questions throughout, please don't hesitate, don't wait until the end. Simply submit your questions at slido.com, hashtag the same hashtag interaction. You can submit your question either anonymously or you can put your name down. You can either join with the QR code or simply by opening the browser. This is where I will be collecting your questions and I will get to them at the very end. So if you feel like you don't have any questions, but you simply like the questions from other participants, feel free to upvote those so we can address the most burning ones at the end. If you have any questions that you would like to ask live, I can simply let you speak. So also, if you feel brave enough, just raise your hand and I will give you the right to speak. So I just submit questions via Slido or basically speak up. Great. Before I jump into the content I have prepared for you, I have 3 more questions that I would like to find out about you, just to kind of really get to know what kind of audience I have in front of me today. So the first question I have for you is whether you're already running all remote meetings or virtual events. Now, fully remote means that really 100% of your attendees are joining online. Up to now, I guess majority of you have had some experience with hybrid meetings, which means that some people were joining in person, some people were joining online. So what does it look like right now in light of the situation that the entire world is facing? I guess you are slowly switching to fully remote meetings and events, or you are at least considering it. And this is what I see from the results of the poll as well. So majority of you is not yet running these meetings, but you are thinking about it. Great. And some of you are already pros, so pressure is on. I hope we can share some insights together at the end or throughout this session. But great to see pros in this talk as well. Right, the second question I have, if you look at these meetings that you're running, what kind of audience do you have? So what is the size of your audience? Is it 1 to 10 people? Is it 10 to 25? Or do you run really large scale meetings of 100 people plus? Okay, so it looks like majority of you is really running those big virtual events of 100 plus people. Okay, no one is running those simple team meetings of 1 to 10 people. All right, good to know when I talk about the content later on. And the last question I have is, what would you say are your biggest struggles when you run or host a remote meeting or a virtual event? Now, in this question, you can actually select more than one option. So feel free, if more than one is relevant to you, feel free to mark more options. We'll be able to look at these later on as well. Okay, you are thinking hard. That's good. So you're reading the answers properly. All right. Great. So keeping people engaged. Yes, presenters are lacking the experience with hosting remote meetings. Yes, definitely. And some of you actually selected other. If you selected other, feel free to simply in the questions tab write down what is the other struggle that you are facing, and we can discuss that struggle at the end during the Q&A round. But majority of you selected the presenters with lacking experience of hosting meetings and keeping people engaged as your major struggle. So good news for you, we are going to talk about all these today. And now that I know who is in my audience, I can finally start talking myself. So let's look at some of the tips how you can engage your audience online. Of course, before you engage your audience, you have to get ready. Now, getting ready for a remote meeting is even more complicated than getting ready for a live meeting. And of course, we spend a lot of time in meetings, in live meetings, and we spend almost the exact amount of time just preparing for them. So imagine preparing for a remote meeting, really it takes up even longer time than this. And I know you probably heard this a lot, and preparation is key. Really, in this case, is just such a golden sentence. And I know perhaps I'm not going to give you any rocket science on this slide, but really bear in mind that this is super important when you run remote meetings. So first of all, you really have to make sure that you rehearse the technology. You have to make sure that you do a dry run. You do dry run with all the people involved, with your speakers. You really test the technology because it all comes down to technology. If it's not working, then your entire event is, of course, a failure. Then make sure that you explore that video conference tool that you are using. Today we are using Zoom. If you previously had only participated in remote meetings, just like every now and then, make sure that now that you are trying to use that video conference tool more, make sure that you explore it like really to the details. You never know what kind of features you actually explore and what it actually has on offer for you. Every time, always make sure that you dial in at least 10 minutes in advance to set it all up. I would even say 15 minutes at least to make sure that your microphone works, your camera works, and so on. You never know what can go wrong, and you really don't want people to be listening to the sound check. Very important point is that you have to agree, if you have more than one speaker or one presenter, you have to agree on who will move through the slides. So for example, if you are running your meeting or event via Zoom, there is an option that you can actually allow someone else to control your slides. So if you have two speakers, they can very nicely present by themselves and they can click through their own slides. But this is also nice to practice before so you don't kind of embarrass yourself in front of your attendees. Always is a good practice to record the meeting because you always have people joining from other time zones. You have people with kids who are sick who cannot join in, so make sure you record it. And don't just rely on your Wi-Fi, and make sure you always have that mobile hotspot ready. If you have it ready, then nothing can go wrong. And also, it's not just about you joining in earlier, but also invite your attendees to join at least 2 minutes before, so you actually get to start on time. I've recently run a webinar with our guest, Nathan Gold, who had this great tip that he actually never starts his meeting at a sharp hour, but he would always start a meeting 10 past. So for example, we started our webinar at 10 past 4. That gives people those extra 10 minutes. So by 4 o'clock, they will have finished all their meetings. And until it's 10 past 4, they have that buffer time so they can actually dial in, put on their audio, camera, and so on. And 10 past 4, we started really sharp. So it's a good practice for you to try as well. Now, in remote meetings, it's very normal that there is an awkward silence. If we have a meeting or event of even just 10 or 15 people, trust me, if you ask a question and let someone speak, there will be this awkward silence. So don't be scared about this awkward silence. It's absolutely normal in a remote setup. And it can always be that people are simply afraid to speak up. because of course they might not know the other attendees and they don't feel like they don't feel brave enough to speak up. In that case, it's always good to remind them that if you use tools such as Slido or any other tool, it's really good that they can actually post their questions anonymously. So in this place, I would like to invite you again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. You can submit them under slido.com, #interaction. You can do so anonymously or with your name on. And I'm very happy to address these questions at the end. Right, so we've looked briefly at the preparation phase of your meeting or event, but let's now look at what happens when you actually start your meeting and you want really to engage with people. The first thing you need to realize is that you are presenting remotely. This is a completely different setup to presenting in person, in front of real people. You really, if you present remotely, it's like speaking to a brick wall, literally, like this guy, right, in the picture. You have no emotions, no live feedback from the people. You cannot judge how you're doing. So you really need to make sure that you engage with the people to get that kind of live feedback from some other engagement. And here are a few tips how. So it's super important that you engage with your online attendees from the very beginning of your meeting or your event. Like today, I just asked you a very simple question, where are you joining us from? But that kind of interaction or engagement at the very start really sets the expectation from the attendees that they are not just there to be in the passive observer mode, but you really expect from them to engage with you and interact throughout the entire event. So it's very important to do it at the very start, so they already know, okay, I'm here really to actually pay attention, and really there will be some kind of activity required from me. Now, there are a few ways how you can do that to make that kickoff of your meeting already interactive. You can either do it with some fun questions. For example, you can now use that remote note and ask them about something funny about whether they wear pajamas to a meeting, or you can always come up with something else. But of course, humor is a very strong weapon. So if you put a fun question at the very start, be sure that people will feel immediately kind of relaxed. The pressure is off the meeting, and they will be put into that sharing mode, which you really want them to be in. If you don't want to use any online tools, you can simply ask them if they have the cameras on. They can simply let you show your workspace or their workspace, or simply ask them to show you your capstone or anything silly that you can really think of. It's just really to get that atmosphere at the start very relaxed and easygoing. So this is just one of the tips you can do as well. If you're running a team meeting, so this is our team meeting from last week, and we've had some very intense weeks, as you can probably tell from our faces. So you can always just double check how your team is doing. How are they feeling? This is a beautiful word cloud. In one word, how would you describe the past week? You can tell it was a very, very intense week. It is always nice to really show that you care and ask this kind of question at the very beginning. If you are brave enough and you would like to experiment with your session format, then this is something that we do in our webinars. We actually give the same question that I have given you at the very beginning. What is your biggest struggle? But I let the audience pick top 3 struggles. And then once they vote, I actually pick the top 3 according to the majority. And then I shape the entire content around those 3 topics only. So I basically let my audience decide about the agenda themselves. Now you can, of course, work around this, but the idea stays the same. If you have prepared your content very well, you are easygoing and you can basically adjust it to your audience decision. It's very important that once you start the meeting, you let people know that you will be using these kind of activities and questions and polls, but you really have to explain them why. It's not because we just want to have some fun or just because we want to be cool, but it's really because we are actually interested in their opinions and you actually want to know how they are doing, what they are thinking, what are their opinions on the subject matter and so on. So it's about them. It's not about you. And the same goes for the questions. You need to tell them at the very beginning that there is no need to wait until the end for them to submit the questions, but they can actually do it throughout. So sometimes people actually forget once it comes to the Q&A part at the end, right? We all know it from conferences. So make sure that you can actually do that throughout the entire time. Now, this is one of my favorite tips. I don't know in how many remote meetings you've already been to and whether you have tried to celebrate something online, but it can get super awkward if you try to clap, right? So you're celebrating some kind of anniversary or some kind of company success and you want to clap. So what do? Everyone is muted. So it's really a good practice that you agree on a gesture that you use with the cameras on to replace that clapping. Now, I've seen some companies do something like that or something like that, or basically just thumbs up or a simple smile. But if you have that agreed upon gesture, it's really nice to be aligned on this page. And the same goes for if you want to speak. Right, so do you raise hand? Like here you can actually do that in Zoom, but if you have the cameras on, basically tell people if they want to speak up, then they just raise their hand and the facilitator actually gives them the word to speak. So it doesn't happen that people speak at the same time and you never know who's going to speak because you don't see each other. So this is also a very good practice to try. A few focus hacks, well, you can encourage your online audience to do. So of course, you can always kindly ask them to turn their cameras on. It's been shown in a study that 82% of users are less likely to multitask if they have the cameras on. So if you have the camera on, of course, you're not going to cook, you're not going to watch Netflix, you're not going to do all those other activities. And it's just a nice double check that you're actually paying attention and that you're really in that meeting or event. Also, another great practice for you to try, you may laugh about this one or you may find it a bit odd, but really try to, if you have a piece of paper nearby, try to grab it, grab a pen or pencil and try to doodle or draw something. And really it enhances your brain activity. And this is not something I say, but it's actually been proven that it really helps your brain to focus. So don't just tell people, oh, now just focus on this, but let them actually draw something and then they can even compare it at the end or something like that. But it really is about that you really focus by doing that doodling or coloring in or simply drawing something. Try it out. And of course, the best way to learn from a meeting or event is if you encourage your attendees to take their notes so that at the end of the day, they can look at what they have heard about and they can take some key learnings out of that. Now, coming over to you, if I would love to find out if you're already doing any of these things that I've already now presented to you. I'd love to find out if you've already tried some of these things or you haven't, or you are not inspired at all. I am very open to honest questions, so please feel free to answer this question. Again, you can address it at slido.com, #interaction, or simply scan the QR code. Now, I told you at the start we will be using Slido a lot, so if you haven't logged on yet, please do so because I would love to find out more about you. All right, so you're doing some of these things already. Great. Some of you are inspired to try, and no one selected that they don't intend to. I'm very happy about that one. Thank you very much. All right, so we've looked at the beginning of the event or meeting, and now what happens when we want to really get into that body or the main content of the meeting. Before I talk about that, I would also like to find out how many presenters you normally have at your remote meetings or events. Now this is a tricky question, and you might vary, of course, across your different types of events or meetings, but on average, like how many presenters you normally have. All right, so half of you 2 to 3. No one has 7+. Oh, yes, okay, right, great. Some of you have just 1 presenter. Okay, I will be talking about that in a minute. Nice, so it's about 2 to 3 or 7+. Great, thank you for that. So when you want to deliver your content, you can think about different ways how you do that. So don't just share it, don't just share your PowerPoint or Google Slides or any other presentation, but really think kind of out of the box. How can you do it differently? You can, for example, if you have more than 1 speaker, if you have at least 1 other speaker, you can try to find some way how to introduce them in some creative way. So for example, when we have our couch talks, these are very informal sessions at our company, we introduce the guest with this very simple poll question with 2 truths and 1 lie about that person. And it gives us that kind of introduction about the person. The person that is the guest of this session basically submits 2 truths and 1 lie, and then we just play around with what could this person be like. But this is also a nice way how you can introduce any kind of speaker, and you already get people thinking about who is the speaker. Also, if you don't have other speaker, but you just basically wanted to start talking about any topic, you really want the audience to get ready for the topic, and you want them to think about it before you actually start talking about it. So you can, for example, ask some kind of controversial question like this one: to what extent do you agree with the following statement that AI will replace the majority of our jobs? The more controversial the question, the more successful, of course. And then once you start talking about this topic, you can ask the question again at the end, and then compare whether actually the opinion among the audience has changed or hasn't. This is also a nice way how to really engage with your audience. You can also check their knowledge, whether they are really following up with you. If you are delivering some heavy content, for example, we had this legal session with our lawyers about some new updates to our security, and then it was really heavy content for all of us. So they made sure that every 5 minutes we had some kind of question to make sure that we actually understood that content. So this is just another way how to ask that. And of course, if you are using any other tools, it's perfectly fine to do that via Zoom, via any other tool that is out there. Slido is just one of them. If you Slido here in the corner, you can see that you actually have a vote count. So you see how many people already voted in your poll. So you know how much time you need for other people to participate in that poll. Guys, do you enjoy playing quiz games? I am bombarding you with questions. I hope you don't mind, but I want to make sure you are with me. We're on the same page. Right, yes, no, yes, no. For now, it looks like the vast majority of you is indeed enjoying playing quiz games. Nice. Well, I'm a big lover of quiz games, and this statistics, yes, no, is actually a reflection of the majority of the population. So trust me, even if you are not a fan of quizzes, the majority of people are, because they are competitive. So it's also a nice way how to engage with your audience, to basically insert some kind of quiz into your content. Now, it doesn't have to be just some fun quiz, but it can be any kind of serious topic, and you can always represent it using a quiz. So you can really run a quiz around serious numbers, updates, OKRs, anything to check the knowledge of your team, of your audience, and it always adds that extra energy into your event. And trust me, as I said, majority of us are very competitive, so they will always appreciate when they can really compete for something and when there is an award at the end, of course. So you will really kind of wake up people like that just by inserting a simple quiz. Now, this was, I have talked a lot about the content and how you share the content, but let me now also briefly touch upon your body language. So in a recent study, it's been shown that there is a direct correlation between the number of views of a TED Talk and the number of speakers' hand gestures. Now, so the more we move with our hands, the more attractive we are to our audience. And why do you think that is? Well, of course, in a remote meeting, this is even more true because people can only see, of course, your head. So they have a really small shot of you. They don't see your entire body. They cannot judge you from your entire stance. So really think about the ways that you use your hands. They are such a powerful tool to emphasize the what you want to say, to emphasize really the most important topics. Do make use of them, but do not overdo it. And equally important is your tone of voice. Now, if you have the camera off, it's of course even more important. Really, it's a good practice that you actually rehearse how you are going to talk, how you are going to address various topics, because people will be listening to you. So you really want to make sure that you change the intonation, you change that dynamic of your voice throughout the entire talk. And just a few interaction tips to make sure that your audience doesn't fall asleep. You really want to mix it up every 5 to 7 minutes. Now, if we are running an in-person meeting or event, we normally recommend about 10 minutes interval between those kind of mix-up activities. But if we are in a remote setup, this is even half down. So make sure that you do bring some kind of change every 5 to 7 minutes, because human attention span is even shorter in that remote setup. Now, how can you bring that change? Of course, you can do it using various tools. So either you can basically just change the speaker, that already brings it that change of dynamic, which I don't have today. So I'm not really walking the path here, but you can also use a poll, either use an online poll using any online tool for that, or you can also do a human poll if you have a small team meeting and people actually have their cameras on. Why not to simply do by the show of hands? Trust me, it will bring some kind of change of energy, and it will already bring that kind of change of dynamic. It will already engage with the people. Next option that you have, how you can change the dynamic every 5 to 7 minutes, is you can basically integrate a short Q&A round. So if you are presenting 3 different topics, well, after the first topic, you can have a short Q&A. After the second topic, you can have a short Q&A, and so on. So you really kind of wake up people again. You get them to speak or to really interact with their questions and with their interests. Also, you can add a breakout session and split the people into different groups. Or, of course, my beloved activity is just doing something physical. So now we are normally spending a lot of time just simply sitting down in front of our computers at home or in our offices. But trust me, if you encourage your people to do something physical, they will be grateful. Perhaps they will find it odd at the beginning, but at the end, they will have that adrenaline, and they will feel more awake and more energized. So try to encourage them to do a simple stretch. Right, and we are coming to the wrap up of a meeting or event. Once we have already got to the end of the meeting, you want your attendees to really upvote the most relevant questions. So as you've already voted at the beginning, you normally organize large-scale events or meetings for more than 100 people. Now imagine those 100 people each have a question. So how do you address that? Well, you only have 10 minutes for the Q&A at the end. Basically, if they upvote the most relevant questions, you know, okay, we can address those top 5 questions, and we will we'll please the majority of our attendees by doing that. Make sure that you give enough time for the Q&A round. This is, I think, something that I've seen a lot, especially at live conferences, where there is a 45-minute time slot for the speaker, and he really speaks for about 44 minutes, and then there's 1 or 2 minutes for the Q&A. Well, no, this is a no-go, because you really want people to interact with you, and you of course want to address their questions because it's about them. So make sure that you spend at least those 10 or 15 minutes on the Q&A at the end, because you want to address their questions. And the same goes for the feedback. If you don't ask for feedback, you cannot improve for the next time. So make sure that you actually dedicate that specific time. Don't just leave by saying, okay, bye-bye, see you next time. And if you have a spare minute, leave us feedback. No, simply really specify that time. Give it those 1 or 2 minutes when people really log on and they give you feedback. So you have that feedback until next time. And of course, you can then implement it to make sure that the next meeting or next event is much better. And one of the last questions I think I have for you is whether you usually collect feedback after a meeting or event. I would love to know. With Slido spoil at Slido, we actually always collect feedback. We are, I would say, over feedback, but sometimes I meet with clients who never actually collect feedback. So because they are scared of facing the negative criticism, of course, from their employees. Okay, but you're a great audience. You often collect feedback, so well done. And those of you who rarely collect feedback, try to implement it next time and really face the truth and make sure that next time, once you implement it, be sure that your people and attendees will really appreciate it, that you have implemented their feedback. Right, and if there are 5 things that you can take away straight away, and you can really apply without really overthinking or over planning, then these are the 5 things. Please try to change your dynamic. Try to break the dynamic and change your presentation, your event every 5 to 7 minutes by doing any of those things that I've mentioned. Second tip I have for you, try to insert a very short quiz to present any updates, or simply use a fun quiz of just 2 or 3 questions. It will make such a huge difference. Third tip I have for you, but I haven't even mentioned it in my presentation. You don't need to actually prepare any content for this kind of format. You can just run a pure Q&A session. Now, some of you may think, but okay, but what is going to be the content if we don't get any questions? Well, try to collect the questions from your attendees in advance. So that way you have the guarantee that you already have some questions once it starts. And then run a simple 30-minute meeting addressing those questions, and also leave the floor open to other questions. You can run this type of format if you have for example, you're in a company and people are really interested to know something about, I don't know, Corona crisis from the leadership. We had this kind of meeting, I would say, all company meeting a few weeks ago, and it was super popular, and I can only really recommend it. So just run a simple Q&A and don't prepare any content, just have your leadership there. And fourth tip I have for you, don't forget to explore your video conference or remote meeting tool. There is always something undiscovered and unexplored, so make sure you spend some time doing that. And of course, don't overcomplicate it, and always keep it simple. Right, so these are the 5 tips I have for you. And now I would be super happy to address any questions that you might have. Please, if you have any, submit them via Slido. Either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the event code interaction. Okay, so why aren't the cameras on in this meeting? I do not know, because I am not the organizer of this meeting. But if you have the right to put them on, please feel free. I would love to see your faces as well. So I'm afraid I cannot answer this question for you. But Eva is asking, do you have tips on preparing the speakers for your online meeting? Yes, of course. So we actually have some printed materials as well, or online materials on our website on Slido.com. Under resources, you can find some already pre-prepared materials for the speakers to really prepare for their online meeting. But as I've said, I will share these slides with you that I have just presented to you, and you can basically share those tips from the preparation phase for the speakers as well. But just make sure that the speakers also get to really listen to that part about how it's super important to engage every 5 minutes with the audience, because otherwise it's very hard to really keep them focused. And it just, of course, it's about practice. So the more you engage your speakers as well into those speaking opportunities, the more prepared they will be. But please feel free to go to Slido.com and check out the resources part, where we have a lot of materials for preparing the speakers for a meeting. All right, thank you, Eva. Now I will just quickly check if there are any questions in Zoom. So perhaps we can see there as well. Someone just shared that they don't think that Zoom is the ideal platform for a large meeting. It's too static despite all the hints. Large meetings need a lot of visuals and involvement. Yes, that is one of the opinions. I don't want to do promotion for Zoom here, but yes, so it could be so. Thank you, Claudia, for these comments, and thank you, Eva, for the thanks comment as well. Right, and I see there are no more questions, but as I've already talked about the importance of feedback to you, I would love to ask you to spend the next 30 seconds to 1 minute just simply answering the feedback form that I have prepared for you. It would be super valuable for me to see whether you found this valuable, and I would love to find out what I can make better for you next time, or for any other participants. It would be really lovely to know. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you, NetworkTables, for giving me this opportunity to be here today. I've enjoyed talking to you, even though I could not actually see your faces, but at least I had that kind of touch with you via the polls and the questions. And again, please do let me know how you found this online session. Thank you very much, and until next time. Bye-bye.